Nick French. Now, I didn't want to read the cheat sheets before because I wanted to play my guessing game, but I can now see you were raised in the Jehovah's Witnesses from the age of 7, where your mother joined the cult, and you were an elder for a number of years, although, as it turns out, a terrible one. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nick French.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it was my mother that was introduced to what was known as the truth. Believe it or not, she had been born into a Jewish family.
Oh, that's a fun religion.
Yeah.
I mean, not in any extreme version.
She then married my dad, who was not Jewish, so she risked losing all her family by doing that. But
not a fun religion, sorry, take it back.
Yeah, so, but she didn't lose all her family. They were quite liberal and what have you. But my mum and dad split up when I was quite young. So when I was about 6 or 7, she had a knock at the door. And it was 2 of Jehovah's Witnesses. And she liked what she heard. And it wasn't long after she became a baptized Jehovah's Witness that she was introduced to somebody in another congregation who was a single man, free to marry, unlike Mark and Cora, and they got married. And it turns out that the person that she married was actually a paedophile. So from the age of 7 onwards, I endured some fairly unpleasant things. Now, when I was little, it's very difficult to discuss these things when you're little. You don't know how to express these things. But I was able to say that he was beating me up. But the trouble is that the Jehovah's Witnesses have a 2-witness rule. And this particular chap was very cunning. He wouldn't beat me up or abuse me in front of other people. So it was my word against his. So when the elders questioned him, he would just deny it. And so after a while, as a young child, I realized that telling anybody about these things wasn't going to make any difference, so I never told anybody about them. So time went on. By the time I was aged about 12 or 13, the abuse had gotten so bad that there was one particular time where I was raped and I had to say, enough is enough. So I told my mum about this, and the elders asked him about it, and he admitted that he had done this. So he was disfellowshipped from the congregation. Result, as far as Jehovah's Witnesses were concerned. But I was pretty screwed up, as you can imagine. So I was looking for unconditional love. Never found it. So at the age of 15, I decided, I looked around the congregation, I saw these happy faces. I wanted to be as happy as they were. So I decided, right, I have to be a Jehovah's Witness. So I was baptized at the age of 15, but I still wasn't happy. And by the age of 17, I was so disappointed with all the hypocrisy I saw in the congregation, I became a pioneer. And I was then questioned by the elders as to whether I was actually doing my hours. Now, at the age of 16, when I had left school, I was the only male that was going to the groups at the morning, so I was the one that would have to take the groups for field service, which was to direct everybody out.
So just to be clear, a man will have to conduct a group of Jehovah's Witnesses. You have a prayer, then he hands out little maps and he says where you go, and then you go out 2 by 2 to the doors. But a sister can't do that unless a brother isn't present, and then she has to put a tea towel on her head.
So
it's true.
And because
that's the least weird thing about it.
And even at the age of 16, when I was the youngest there, with people that had been witnesses for 20, 30 years, and I'd been a witness for maybe a year, I had more authority than they did. So I was being questioned about whether I was doing things right, and I was seeing all sorts of hypocritical things. So
why were they questioning whether you had done your hours?
Because they said they never saw me out, because what would happen is the circuit overseer would say that all the pioneers have to be seen at weekends.
Oh yeah, I remember this rule.
Because I was out going and doing my hours through the week, because I wanted to enjoy my weekends, they didn't see me out in the ministry. And so, I was being questioned about it.
I was told not to work on the weekends, you get double time on the weekends, so you can earn double the money.
Excellent.
You know, and it was $8 an hour. You know, it was sort of like working 16 hours a week, so it was nothing. Yeah. And they said no, because they've got to see you on a Sunday.
Yes.
Being seen to be doing the right thing is so much more important than doing the right thing as a Jehovah's Witness, isn't it? Yep. Being seen to be doing the right thing. I mean, frankly, we could all still be in if we would just shut the fuck up and turned up at the meeting and went, I've got an answer to the question. Yep. So you start pioneering, you get held up with the elders because you're still not enough, it's not good enough.
That's it. On top of that, my abuser was still walking the streets. And
because you didn't take him to the police?
My mum actually contacted the police 2 years after I had disclosed what had happened. And this was because I had suspected that my younger brother, who was as a result of that marriage, was also being abused. So when I said this to my mum, she then called the police, but then she dropped all the charges.
Is this because it brings reproach on Jehovah's name?
I suspect that is the case. Yeah,
you're discouraged from going to the police because otherwise you're dragging Jehovah's name through the mud. Feels like Jehovah's name's pretty muddy at that point. Yeah. Feels like it's got a lot of mud on it. Like maybe taking it to the police would wash the mud off. Yeah. But so he was walking the streets and you knew that? He
was walking the streets and I was terrified that I'd actually bump into him because I knew that by the time I was 17 I knew exactly what I'd have done if I'd bumped into him in the street. I didn't want to spend 20, 30 years in prison for what I would do to him. So I decided that I'd move back to my hometown or back up to where I was born, which was in Scotland, where my dad was still living. So I phoned him up one day and I said, Dad, can I come and live with you? And he said, great, yep.
Was he a witness?
He wasn't a witness, never has been a witness, never will be a witness. But of course, here was a young 17-year-old, ministerial servant material, turning up in a new congregation, and I was viewed as a fatherless boy because my dad wasn't a witness.
Sure, so he was basically not a person.
Yeah. Well, I was actually love-bombed because here's a young lad who's making all this effort to come along.
I certainly would have paid you attention.
Yeah. Well.
Ministerial servant material, sure, pioneering.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really good.
Listen, we had hardly any options. Any man that would come in, we'd be like, hey, do you want to come on my return visits with me?
Thanks, Deborah. So I was absolutely love-bombed and I thought, oh, this is actually quite good. This is maybe what I've been looking for. But of course that soon died off. I wasn't the new boy anymore. Somebody else turned up. And then it just so happened that I obviously ticked all the boxes. And by the time I was 30, I was invited to become an elder. It just so happened that just before this took place, my abuser was reinstated into the congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, which means that he was no longer disfellowshipped, he was viewed as a brother, an ordinary person who is able to live their life as a Jehovah's Witness. When I found out about this, I was incensed. And I wrote a letter to the congregation that had reinstated him and said, what repentance has he shown? And, how can this be? I was never even told that he had been
Had he
reinstated.
tried to apologise to you at this point?
No, never. So I had written this letter to the elders and I thought I was going to be in trouble because 2 elders came knocking at my door and I thought, oh no, it's about this letter. And instead they just said, is there any reason why you shouldn't be an elder? And I quickly thought, oh, I'm not in trouble. No, I can't think of any reason. Well, that's great, we'll announce it tomorrow that you're going to be an elder. And that was it. And I quite often say to people, being an elder is a bit like when you work in a hotel. You go into a hotel reception, it's all nice and fancy, but if you're actually working in the hotel, you don't see all the nice fancy stuff because you're working in the dingy office out the back. And it's a bit like that being an elder. You see what's going on behind the curtain, and it's not quite the nice lovey-dovey thing that everyone else sees.
Tell us everything.
I once read a book by an ex-witness who wrote this story, and in the story he said that he got great satisfaction by going up onto the platform and reading everybody's confessions to the audience. I'm not going to do that.
Reading everyone's confessions?
Yeah, well, in this story, it was just a story that he'd written, but part of the story was...
because people come to elders and confess.
That's right, to confess everything.
So did you have that? Did people come and...
I would regularly get phone calls at all sorts of...
This is the thing. We self-policed.
Yep.
They didn't... You just go and go, oh, I've been having some doubts, or, oh, you know, boys were constantly presumably confessing to masturbation.
No, actually.
Really?
No,
well, they were doing it.
But I would regularly get calls from people saying, oh, I need to see you, and then they would confess to this.
What sort of things?
Like, I've just slept with somebody and I shouldn't have.
Oh, wow. Like, that's full on.
Yeah.
And mine were nothing compared to that.
Yeah. So it was kind of quite interesting. But as far as I was concerned, as an elder, I was trying to help these people. They were on the road to life, and I was going to help them.
Were you single at this point?
No, I was married.
Are you married?
I was married, 2 children. And then, by the time I was in my late 30s, I've always had kind of, not doubts, but kind of questions that were never answered. And it was always a case of, well, I don't have enough faith. But also because of what I'd been through as a child, I had no self-worth either. And so I never felt that I was going to survive Armageddon. But I knew that these people in the congregation want to survive, go through the Great Tribulation, survive Armageddon, live in paradise earth. And I seem to be able to help these people to, you know, have a clean conscience before God.
But you thought you would die in Armageddon, did you?
But yeah, I felt that I was...
Why? Just a foreboding, or was there a specific thing?
Just because I never felt that I was going to be good enough. And so...
If I was running Armageddon, you'd get through.
Oh, thank you.
If I was the decider.
And so, yeah, I kept having all sorts of doubts and things like that. And then there were certain things that I would see happening in the congregation. I thought, this just isn't right. And then, a bit like Mark and Cora, there was a particular time when I was giving a talk at a congregation. And I had given this talk so many times that I didn't need the outline. And every time I did it, I changed it. And in the end...
Just to say, brothers give talks, they get it given an outline, and then from that they can sort of loosely, you know, they're trusted because they're elders to not say the wrong thing, so they can sort of make it their own a little bit.
Yes.
And so you didn't need the outline?
I didn't use the outline. Instead, I just kind of gave it ad lib. And it was completely different to what the script was, because I knew that would be the last time I'd ever be in a Kingdom Hall.
Wow.
And when I walked out, I thought, that's it.
So you gave what essentially is a sermon, if you're not a Jehovah's Witness, and you went massively off-piste.
Yeah.
And then you just basically someone gave the prayer, and you just went, oh, through Jesus Christ our Lord, amen, fuck you. No. Just walked out the door.
Pretty much.
Wow.
But I had to do it in stages. Because my children were very young, and I knew that if I was to simply hand in a resignation letter, that I would suddenly become the evil apostate and, you know, the child of the devil. So I decided that I would fade. And I managed to get away with that for a couple of years. And
did you resign as an elder?
I resigned as an elder. They didn't want me to resign.
Yeah.
It would take 6 months for them to accept my resignation, because I had to wait for the circuit overseer to come and accept my resignation.
What if you just turned up to the meeting naked? That would have been a way. They would have been like, yeah, okay, you're out.
Yeah, but then it would kind of prove the fact that I'm a bit of a Fruit Loop.
Right, so you had to do it slowly.
So I had to do it slowly.
Okay.
And then about two...
Do you had to be an elder for 6 months not believing it, really?
Yes.
Just going through the motions?
Well, I never went to the meetings or anything like that.
Oh.
No, I had handed in my resignation letter.
Oh, so you stayed home and you were still an elder?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Bizarre.
Cushy congregation.
So then, about 2 years into my fade, I had a knock at the door, and it was 2 elders. And they said, we need to see you. And I said, well, what's it about? And they said, well, we hear you've got a Christmas tree.
And the lights are flashing behind you and you're going, what? No, that's just some interior design we're thing. Like, what?
Yeah.
Were you dressed as Santa when you opened the door?
Well, I wish I
That
had
would have been awesome.
It would have been. So I said, well, I'll not speak to you just now. I'll come and visit you, and because my children are in the house and everything. So I went to visit them, and I thought, this is absolute a load of shite. It really is. And as soon
Did you have a Christmas tree, just to be clear?
I did have a Christmas tree. And so I handed in what's known as a disassociation letter, because I knew I just didn't want my time wasted like that anymore. It was just absolute nonsense. And by this time, my children were old enough to understand that I wasn't going to be, the child of the devil. And so, as far as my family were concerned, they didn't live anywhere near me. So I never told them that I had disassociated myself. And then it wasn't for another maybe 10 or 11 months that then my mum found out that I had disassociated myself. And all I got was an email from her saying, I've heard from the elders that you're disassociated. This will be the last communication we have.
It's just not what. How can people do it?
Yeah.
How can people do it? I shunned very close friends, and it was very painful. But I couldn't have shunned my mum.
Yeah.
I just would have not have.
Yeah.
I just would have secretly seen her. That's just not okay.
It's horrendous, isn't it?
Especially when your mum knew what you'd been through.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but you told her, 2-witness rule, you lived with it for years, then it comes out, and then, no, it's not okay. Can I have her number? Because I would like to phone her and talk to her about it. That is just that's the worst, awful story.
So, as it happens, when I was starting to have doubts, I realised that I wasn't going to see any justice for what had happened to me as a child. And a very good friend of mine convinced me that I should really go to the police.
Yes.
And so that's what I did. And after 2 years... So when my statement was taken, 2 years later, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
And good, because the irony was he was in being a confessed paedophile and you were out for a Christmas tree.
Yep. And believe it or not...
That's it, guys. That's it. That's the truth of the situation.
Believe it or not, he's still a Jehovah's Witness.
What?
Yep.
Well, he's still a brother, and he's in the
still a Jehovah's Witness.
What in the Wormwood Scrubs congregation?
Yeah, something like that.
Just quite flourishing, probably.
Yeah. So it's just absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
That's outrageous. So
Yeah.
you're out. So your mother won't speak to you, but he's in prison, and he's just.
Yeah,
oh.
he would be viewed as a good association, whereas I'm not.
Well, you had. Did you have an angel on top of the tree? Tell me more about the decorations. It's absolutely outrageous. Well, Nick, that's an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing it. Big round of applause for brother Nick.